My husband always called my salary play money. At family parties, he'd pat me on the head and joke about my little office job. For 2 years, I just swallowed his mockery. That is, until the day he was called into my office for a meeting he had no idea he had. With me, by the time he walked out, that smirk was gone for good. And so was his career. If you have ever been underestimated, you are going to want to hear this. But first, do me a quick favor and hit those like and subscribe buttons. It really helps more people find our community, and it means more than you know. It is weird how a relationship can feel like a fortress one day and a prison the next, isn't it? When I met Mark, our life felt like the perfect partnership. We met in college, two ambitious kids totally focused on the future. He was studying engineering, and I was all in on information systems and business management. We were a team. We spent late nights in the library, fueled by cheap coffee and shared dreams, quizzing each other and celebrating every tiny win like we'd hit the lottery. Our first few years of marriage were just like that. We were broke, but we were so happy. Our tiny apartment was furnished with hand-me-downs and thrift store finds. We'd cook these elaborate meals on a shoestring budget, pretending we were at some five-star restaurant. His income and my income weren't separate things. It was just our income, feeding into this shared reservoir of hope. We talked about everything: the house with the big backyard, the kids we wanted, the places we'd go. We were building a life by brick, and every single brick was laid with mutual respect. He was my biggest cheerleader, and I was his. When I landed my first corporate job, he took me to the fanciest restaurant we could almost afford and toasted to my brilliance. And when he got his first big engineering gig, I framed his offer letter and hung it right on our wall. We were equals, partners. The change was so gradual I almost didn't see it coming. It started about 3 years into our marriage, right after Mark got a major promotion. He was made a senior project manager at his firm, and it came with a salary that dwarfed anything we had ever made. I was genuinely ecstatic for him. I threw him a surprise party and watched with a heart full of pride as he soaked it all in. But something in him shifted that day. The pride slowly started to curdle into arrogance. The we started turning into I. I am a senior project manager. I am making 6 figures now. My salary can finally get us out of this apartment. The first time he joked about my salary, it felt harmless. We were out with friends. The bill came, and I pulled out my card. He just laughed, gently pushing my hand away. "Don't worry, honey," he said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "I've got this. You can save your play money for shoes." A few people chuckled. I felt this hot prickle of embarrassment, but I smiled and let it go. He's just proud, I told myself. He's happy to be the provider. But it didn't stop. It became his favorite recurring joke, a joke only he thought was funny. I'd come home excited about a small bonus, and he'd literally pat me on the head like a dog and say, "That's great, sweetie. You bought yourself a new purse." He stopped asking about my work. My complex projects and my Team S successes were all just glossed over. He'd nod while scrolling through his phone, then launch into a long story about his day, his pressures, his wins. It was like my career had been downgraded to a quaint little hobby. The worst part was during family gatherings. At Thanksgiving, his uncle asked what I did. Before I could even answer, Mark jumped in with a huge grin. "She has a little office job, keeps her busy," he said with a wink. "She does something with computers. It's cute." He put his arm around me in a way that was supposed to look affectionate but just felt possessive and diminishing. My face flushed. In that moment, I wasn't his partner. I was his accessory. I tried talking to him about it. Multiple times. At first, I was gentle. "Mark, it really bothers me when you joke about my salary. It makes me feel like you don't respect my job." He'd just laugh it off. "Oh, relax. You're so sensitive. Of course I respect you. I'm just proud I can take care of us. Let me have this." He twisted his mockery into a form of pride, a logic that made me feel guilty for even bringing it up. As his condescension grew, so did his control over our money. He opened a new joint account where he suggested our paychecks go for simplicity. But it was his account. He managed it, paid the bills, and tracked the spending. He recategorized my salary in his mind. It was now my allowance. Why don't you just keep your paycheck in your own account for personal stuff? Lunches, clothes, whatever. I'll handle the real expenses, the mortgage, the cars, the investment. It sounded generous, but the subtext was loud and clear. My money was trivial, and his was essential. I was no longer a partner. I was a dependent. I'll admit, I let it happen. I was just so exhausted from fighting. It was easier to retreat. I told myself it didn't matter. I knew my worth. But when the person who's supposed to be your biggest supporter consistently belittles you, it chips away at your soul. You start to question yourself. Is he right? Is my job insignificant? Meanwhile, at my little office job, my career was quietly exploding. I worked for a massive multinational tech corporation as a systems architect in the global human resources division. For the past 18 months, I'd been leading a colossal project, codenamed Project Unify. The goal was to build a brand new, unified human capital management platform for the entire parent company and all its subsidiaries. I was working 60-hour weeks, managing a team of brilliant engineers, and presenting to C-suite executives. At work, I was a respected leader. My opinion mattered. Then I'd come home, and Mark would ask if my play money covered my lunch. It was like living a double life. The breaking point didn't come with a whisper, it came with a crash. We were at the dining table planning that trip to Italy we'd always dreamed of. Okay, this is going to be about $12,000 for the 2 weeks, Mark said, leaning back in his chair. It's a lot, but my bonus just cleared. I can cover it. I felt a warmth spread through my chest. This was it, a chance to be a team again. That's amazing, Mark, I said with a genuine smile. But you don't have to cover all of it. I've been saving. I have over $8,000 in my account from my last 2 bonuses. I can put that towards the trip. We can do it together. I expected him to be pleased, impressed even. I thought he might see that my play money was actually something substantial. Instead, a slow, pitying smile spread across his, and then he laughed. Not a chuckle, a deep, condescending belly laugh. Oh, honey, he said, patting my hand like I was a child, offering him a few crumpled dollars. That is so sweet. But why don't you keep your little piggy bank for souvenirs? I've got this. This is what a real salary is for. And snap. Something inside me didn't just break. It turned to ice. All the small cuts, the head pat, the dismissive jokes, they all crashed together in that single moment. It was never about the money. It was about power. It was about respect. And I understood with chilling clarity that he had absolutely none for me. My first instinct wasn't to yell or cry. I was past that. I just felt cold. This wasn't a partnership that needed fixing. This was a dynamic that needed to be shattered. I pulled my hand away. My voice was steady, completely empty of emotion. Mark, I need you to listen to me very carefully, I said, deciding to try one last time. When you call my savings a little piggy bank, it makes me feel completely and utterly devalued. It makes me feel like my hard work and my contributions to our life are meaningless. It makes me feel like you don't see me as your partner. I laid it all out. This was his chance to finally hear me. He just stared, his face a mask of impatient annoyance. He let out a heavy sigh, the kind of sigh a man uses when he's burdened by an overly emotional woman. God, are we doing this again? You're being hysterical over a joke. It's not that deep. It's a fact. I make the real money. Someone has to be the adult in this relationship, and that's me. I'm sorry if the truth hurts your feelings, but it's the truth. And there it was, the final nail. He didn't just dismiss my feelings. He presented his disrespect as an objective truth. That single sentence sealed his fate. That was the moment I stopped trying to save our partnership and started planning my exit. I finally accepted it. You can't reason with someone who refuses to see you. You can only show them. I looked at him, my expression unreadable. Okay, I said softly. Just one word. Okay. I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked out of the room, leaving him there alone with his vacation plans. He probably thought he'd won the argument. He had no idea he had just lost everything. The next few days were quiet. A tense, brittle silence hung over the house. Mark clearly mistook my calm withdrawal for pouting. He probably thought I'd get over my hissy fit and things would go back to his normal. He'd occasionally say things like, "Still thinking about Italy? We'll make it happen. Don't worry." He was completely clueless. He saw a sulking wife. He was actually looking at a strategist in the middle of a war he didn't even know had started. My planning wasn't about petty revenge. It was about necessity. His words, "Someone has to be the adult," had defined our dynamic. Fine. Now I was going to redefine it. The pieces started clicking into place in my mind. My massive project, Project Unify, was entering its final phase. We had finished migrating data from the parent company's main divisions. The last, most complex step was integrating the recently acquired subsidiaries. One of those subsidiaries was a mid-sized engineering firm called Weston Price Engineering, Mark's company. I knew, of course, that his company had been acquired. He'd complained about the new corporate bureaucracy and the HR nonsense he had to deal with. He just had no idea that the HR nonsense was me, or, more accurately, the system I had spent 2 years of my life building from scratch. As project director, I had the highest level of security clearance for the new platform. I could see everything. Every salary, every performance review, every disciplinary note, for every single person in the entire global company. It was a godlike level of access, and I took that responsibility incredibly seriously. One night, while Mark was asleep, I was running a final diagnostic on the data from Weston Price. Morbid curiosity took over. I typed his name into the system. Employee ID 784B29, Mark Peterson, Senior Project Manager. And there it was. His entire professional life laid out on my screen. The first thing I looked at was his salary. He always threw around phrases like deep six figures. The number on the screen was good, it was solid, but it was about 30 less than he had led me to believe. He had inflated his own income just to fuel his ego. But that wasn't even the best part. The real story was in his performance reviews. He always acted like he was this corporate superstar. The reviews told a different story. They were mediocre. He met expectations. That's it. And then there were the notes from his managers over the last 3 years. Phrases just jumped off the screen. Displays arrogance in team settings, resistant to feedback, struggles with collaboration. Communication style can be perceived as condescending. I wasn't even angry. I was just seeing. The man who called me sensitive at home was being flagged for his toxic behavior at work. The guy who acted like a titan of industry was really just an average employee with an attitude problem. His entire superiority complex was a lie. He didn't mock my salary because it was small. He mocked it because his ego was so fragile he needed to believe I was smaller to feel big. That's when the plan formed. It wasn't about getting him fired. That was too simple. This needed to be more elegant. It needed to be a lesson. A few days later, Mark came home and threw his briefcase on the floor. "Ugh, another mandatory corporate training next week," he grumbled. "Have to drive down to the parent company's headquarters for some all-day thing on a new HR system. Total waste of my time, but I have to show face." I just nodded, sipping my water. "That sounds annoying," I said, my voice perfectly neutral. I knew exactly what meeting he was talking about. It was my meeting. It was the official launch of Project Unify for senior leadership from the new subsidiaries, and I was leading it. My name, Sarah Jenkins, Senior Project Director, was on the invitation he had received. He hadn't made the connection. Or maybe he saw the name and thought, what a coincidence. The idea that his wife, the one with the cute job, could be a senior project director at his own parent company was so far outside his reality that his brain just couldn't go there. His condescension had made him blind, and I was about to drive a truck right through his blind spot. The morning of the meeting, Mark was in full martyr mode. "I can't believe I'm losing a whole day for this," he complained, adjusting his tie. "I have actual work to do. Instead, I have to go listen to some HR drone talk about their clunky new software." I was already in my own power suit. "Well, try to have a good day," I said, betraying nothing. "Yeah, right," he scoffed. He kissed the air next to my cheek and walked out the door, totally oblivious that we were heading to the same building. I arrived an hour before him and walked into the main executive boardroom. My team was already there, doing final checks. I was completely calm. My focus was absolute. This was more than a project launch. It was a reckoning. At 9 a.m., the attendees started to file in senior managers, directors, VPs. Mark walked in with his boss, David, laughing and radiating his usual confidence. His eyes swept right past me as I stood at the front, talking to our Chief Human Resources Officer. I was just part of the furniture. He took a seat right in the middle of the long mahogany table. He still hadn't really seen me. At 9:15, I walked to the podium at the head of the table. "Good morning, everyone," I said, my voice clear and steady through the room's microphone. "Thank you all for being here." I saw Mark's head snap up. His eyes widened. The color drained from his face. His smile froze, then just melted into a mask of pure shock. He stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. His boss, David, leaned over and whispered something. Mark could only give a tiny, jerky nod. His eyes locked on mine. I didn't acknowledge him. I didn't even blink. This was my room. For those I haven't met, my name is Sarah Jenkins. I am the Senior Project Director for Global Human Capital Management, and for the last 2 years, my team and I have been building the platform we are here to launch today, Project Unify. For the next hour, I commanded that room. I was articulate. I was confident. I was in charge. I could feel Mark's eyes on me the entire time, the gaze of a man watching his entire world crumble. The woman he called was holding a room of executives in the palm of her hand. Then came the moment I had planned. "Now, I'd like to walk you through a practical example of the system's power," I said, picking up the remote for the main screen. "One key feature is its ability to flag when an employee's compensation seems out of line with their performance. Let's pull up an anonymized employee profile as a case study." I clicked the remote. An employee file appeared on the huge screen behind me. No name, no photo, just an ID number. But I saw Mark flinch. He recognized it. I walked the room through the profile. As you can see, this individual's salary is in the top 30th percentile for their role. However, their performance reviews for the past 3 years have consistently been in the meets expectations category. And on top of that, I clicked again. The system has flagged multiple comments from reviews citing issues with team collaboration and a condescending communication style. The room was silent. "Our algorithm automatically flags this as a high-priority profile," I explained calmly. "It suggests the employee may be overcompensated relative to their performance and their negative impact on team morale." This is the kind of data-driven insight that was impossible to get before. "Mr. Peterson, from Weston Price." I said his name. I turned and looked directly at him for the first time. "You've been a senior manager for years. How might a manager address a situation like this?" Every head in the room turned to him. His face was gray. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He was trapped. His own boss was looking at him, waiting. The CHRO was looking at him. He was being asked to pass judgment on his own professional record in front of the people who decided his future. He just shook his head, unable to speak. I let the silence hang for a moment, letting the humiliation sink in. Then, I gave a small, professional smile. "Perhaps we can come back to that." I turned back to the screen and moved on. When the meeting ended, Mark was frozen in his chair. The Chief Human Resources Officer, a formidable woman named Eleanor Vance, walked over to his table. She looked right at him. "Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "My office, now." He had been called to my office building for my meeting and was now being summoned by HR. The mockery had come full circle. The drive home that night was the quietest it had ever been. Mark just stared out the passenger window, his face a mix of shame, disbelief, and fear. The arrogant man who left the house that morning was gone. In his place was a broken stranger. He wasn't fired. Eleanor was too smart for that. Instead, he was placed on a formal performance improvement plan. His promotion was rescinded. His attitude problem was now officially documented at the highest level. His career at that company was effectively over. That night, we finally had the conversation we should have had 2 years ago. He sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands, and he cried. For the first time, he gave a real gut-wrenching apology. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," he whispered. "I had no idea. I was so arrogant, so stupid. I saw you, but I didn't see you." It was the beginning of a long, painful, but necessary process. We started couples counseling. He had to confront the deep insecurity that made him feel the need to belittle me. I had to learn to trust that his newfound respect was genuine, not just a product of fear. The HR call wasn't the end of our story. In a weird way, it was a new beginning. It was the reset button on a relationship that had become toxic. The dynamic of our marriage was completely reborn. He started asking about my day and actually listening. He celebrated my successes as our successes. We started combining our finances again, this time as true equals. He eventually left that company and found a new job at a smaller firm where he could start fresh. The swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet humility. He became a better engineer, a better colleague, and a better man for it. My story isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when respect disappears from a relationship. He didn't mock my salary because it was small. He mocked it because his own self-worth was fragile. True partnership isn't about the numbers on a paycheck. It's about the value you show each other when no one else is looking. And sometimes, to save something, you have to be willing to turn on all the lights, even in a corporate boardroom, so they can finally, truly see you in all your brilliance.